Hi, my name's Lain Hensley, and I'm one of the co-owners and founders of Odyssey Teams Incorporated. For years now, we've been delivering our Helping Hands workshop, where in the culmination of the program, we build the prosthetic hand. We're empowering you now to have the 10-pack, which is going to include 10 hands and everything you need to facilitate the program yourself. What we're going to do right now is I'm going to show you all the parts of the hand. I'm actually going to assemble one, and I'm going to stop at a few points where your participants are going to run into trouble and they may come to you at the help desk. Let's get started. So right now I'm going to basically take what the participants receive, what we call a program-ready hand, and in the 10-pack there's 10 of these. I'm going to open it up and show you sort of what's going to happen as the participants get into trying to assemble a hand. They're going to have their instruction manual, which they see do not open until instructed, so if you're doing other activities before the build that they don't dive in and discover what you're going to be building. And then they have in the large Ziploc bag the blue Ziploc bag, which has all the tools and the Sharpies and giveaways and things in them. And then in the larger bag is the actual hand components themselves. So let's open it up and have a look. What we have here is what we call the blue zipper bag. And this has all of the tools and supplies they need to build the hand. They get a few Sharpies to decorate the bag. They can obviously share with other teams to get more colors. Go ahead and just dump everything out. They should have 2 different size Allen keys. They'll get a few of these zipper pulls. There's a couple different sizes of these, and those are just giveaways if the participants want them. This is a hooking tool that they'll use as one of the final steps. They'll need to hook a small spring, a screwdriver, but they won't actually be using this as a screwdriver. We have a really short head on it. With a long screwdriver, people might stab themselves, so it's really short, and it's only designed to just push the pins in so that they're all sub-flush and smooth, so just below the surface. The hand itself comes in this Ziploc bag here, the zipper bag. And this is the bag that they're going to eventually decorate. I'm going to take out all the supplies, and let's just see what we have. All the straps, those are going to be the mechanism that holds the hand or the prosthetic hand onto what's referred to as the residual limb. That's the proper terminology for the leftover part of the arm is referred to as the residual limb. And this is what's going to hold it onto the eventual recipient. Pull out some more of the supplies. This is the cuff that's going to go over the residual limb as well. Let's take a look at the smaller parts that make up what's referred to, and you'll see this in your instruction manual, as the bulk hand. And the bulk hand is everything you can picture from sort of the wrist up, the part that's going to open and close. All right, so I'm going to do a quick inventory here of what we have, and you can just sort of see how this plays out. Okay. Now there's the larger parts, and then in this small tin here are the really small parts that make up sort of the interior or guts of the bulk hand. And that's what matches up with all of these gears to make the hand open and close. We've given you this tin, hopes that the participants would actually put the supplies in there so they don't roll off of the table and you lose some. All right, let's look at the manual. First step of the manual, we'll instruct them to take a look at the inventory. So these are all the larger parts and here are the small parts, and this is where they start learning the terminology of what things are called. The extension spring, the compression springs, the brass paws, and so forth down the line. If your teams want to lay out all of these little items and see that they have everything, that's fine, but they'll discover if they're missing a part along the way. One of the things to be aware of is there's a clear tubing here. Now there's 2 of these that come in the small Ziploc bag, and lots of teams will probably come to you and say, hey, we didn't get the clear tubing, and ask them to look very closely in the bag for that clear tubing, because sometimes static electricity will hold those clear tubing in the bag. Okay, so I have 2 of them here. That's what I need. So I'm just going to set this aside and we're going to begin. So if your teams turn to page 1, which is where they should start, they're going to assemble it. Now, I'm not going to go through every step. I'm just going to build it because obviously I'm a semi-expert at how this hand goes together. I'm going to build it, and then at a certain points I'm going to stop and show you some of the common pitfalls that teams will fall into. Okay, you'll see here that I've inserted the brass paws with the roll pins in through the side. If you take a look here, you can see on the camera angle there, they're going different directions. That's incorrect. This one is in the correct position, and the next move is going to be to insert the clear tubing into this small hole here, and they just basically jam this clear tubing all the way down as far as they can so that it sits under this little sort of stair step in the brass paw. Now this one is going the wrong direction for me to do that, so you have to remove it. In your help desk supplies, you're going to receive a very high-tech tool which looks like a paper clip, because that's what it is, and it has a small little bend on it. The purpose of the paper clip, and this is what your help desk people will do, is to slip it into this hole that the roll pin is going from the reverse side and simply push that pin out. You can see it kind of shot out into my hand. You may have a few of those on the ground, you need to find them. So now I've got it out, and then just give those supplies back to your team and have them insert it. So they simply just change the orientation of it, slip that roll pin back in, and then I can take my screwdriver tip and I can push this in sub-flush, and that roll pin is inserted properly. Now get the clear tubing. It's important that you insert this clear tubing after you get that roll pin in. For some reason, participants, they want to put this clear tubing in and put the brass paw in and then try to insert the roll pin. That puts a lot of pressure inside of this hole here, and it's difficult to line up that roll pin. So if they're saying they're not able to get those in, have them pull that plastic out and go ahead and just put the brass paw in with the roll pin in the side sub-flush, and then insert this down into the hole. Okay, right now I have the geared digit. This is the geared digit. This would be one of the moving pieces. And I've inserted the compression spring into there. Now it's important right here that we slide that compression spring over so that there's a gap right here. This is one of the critical pieces that if your participants don't do, they're going to end up damaging that spring and you're going to need to pull it out and replace it. Once we have the compression spring into the geared digit, now it's time to attach it to the center rigid digit. You can see this is going to go on this side. Now this is where this small opening here lines up with the compression pin. Go ahead and put that in there. This is called the open position. I can open and close it and see how this is going to eventually work. You can see I have the complete side on. I have one of the geared digits moving freely, and I can see this sort of spring action to it, and I've inserted these all the way. Sometimes participants will try to do both sides simultaneously. It can be very difficult to do that. This pin can slip out. Getting both of them on is difficult, so if you have teams having trouble with it, encourage them to do one side at a time. The instructions say clearly one side at a time, then repeat. But for some reason they skip over that. So now that I've got this side working perfectly, I'm going to go ahead and move to the other side. Now, in tightening these, I'm going to use this to tension it all the way, but let me show you something that sometimes what participants will do and get them in trouble. If I take these out, you will see that this pin, everything about the hand is designed to do something. It's very purposeful, very well designed. Actually, it was recently inducted into the Smithsonian. But essentially, the way that this pin goes in here, that's going to be very important in just the next step. I'm going to show you a quick little troubleshooting issue. If a team puts this on and they do not insert these pins, and then they go about trying to marry this main bulk hand with the base of the hand here. So if I slip that in there, it may look like it's operating properly, but if they close this digit and I peek in here, you'll see that there can be a problem that happens. See, you can see how this works. See how that ratchets? And then when it's going to release like this. But notice now how it released, this went up there and now it's stuck. It's not going to ever open again. And that's because they did not insert this pin which would have stopped that from happening because it goes into that space right there. Okay, so the big picture is it's very important to stop this from happening like that keeps this oriented over here on the gear side. That's why these pins are so important, that when this side is on, that they be in place. So go ahead and separate those two and be sure that when this side is on and these pins are in, that the gears move. They should move very freely, just like that. You can see they're real floppy because the brass paw is not engaging with the gear yet. All right, we're looking good. We've got the bulk hand almost complete. These should be moving freely. So if you're troubleshooting a hand and you've taken it apart to this point and those don't move freely, it's because they have punctured into one of those springs that was inside the gear digit where we created that little space. They didn't create the little space, and that pin is in the middle of that spring. It will damage the spring and you just have to replace it. In your supplies, you'll have extras of those springs. So now I've got the bulk base ready, and I'm going to join these two. It's important that they have this clear tubing underneath of the step and that they give it a little push down, and they will join very easily. It should slip right in there. Now this is a big move right here. Once they've inserted these two, they get the base to hand pivot pin. This is going to cause this base to the hand and make the pivoting action. Now lots of teams will think this pin is too big, it's too big, it's too big, it doesn't fit. Because it'll fit easily through here, but it's extremely difficult to get it through this smaller hole. They'll say they don't have the right size, they do have the right size. Just let them know it's a very important connection. We would never want it to come apart, so that's why it's so difficult to get it through there. So the best advice that I can give is that they will need to get it started. I'm going to go ahead and just use the carpeted edge of our workbench here. You can see how that's starting to push on it, right? Now if I push down and I kind of wiggle the two slightly, it went in. See how that works? Now this is where your screwdriver comes in, because you can use this back side to push on it to get it in there quite a ways. And then use the screwdriver head. You can see this is not sub-flush. You can see that sticking up and that's sticking out slightly. This is where they really have to push hard. You can see now that's disappeared. Just below the surface, so that when the eventual user, recipient is using it, that doesn't get caught when they put their hand in their pocket, right? Or get caught on anything when they're using the hand. So you can see now we've got a potential hinge point. That's the base to hand pivot pin. It's pivoting action. Now we've inserted the base to hand pivot pin and things are moving along well, but I want to show you that if for some reason you have to remove this pin that was very difficult to get in, you can do it. You use the short end of your Allen key. You can see that I'm just going to start pushing on it here. You can see I'm pushing it out. It's out into this point. In your supplies, you will receive some pliers, and I just pulled it out the rest of the way. Now, if I had to separate these to do whatever repair I did, and then I'm ready to put it back together. Again, we push these down, marry those two, should come right together, no problem. And now I'm gonna put this base to hand pivot pin. Now, I showed you before pushing this on the edge of the table. I'm gonna show you another technique that lots of participants use. They take their screwdriver and they just start pounding on it. And that's okay, look, hammered right in. Okay, now once it's in there like that, again, they use the end of the screwdriver. This is very short. You can see I couldn't stab myself. And I make that sub-flush, sub-flush, sub-flush. All my pins are sub-flush. The top is sub-flush. We're ready to go. Now we're getting close. Let's finish this off. Here's where you'll need some assistance, I would imagine. I've got my hooking tool, and in my tin I should have the smallest, tiniest pin of them all. Okay, and this is the pin that's going to sit into this base here. You might have noticed I had an assistant help me pull this out, and your teams are working in teams of 3, probably someone on the instructions, someone decorating the bag, and there are times when they'll need more than one hand. Also, we have the koozie, or the hand guard that people be wearing over their hand if you want to give them an extra degree of difficulty, and I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see this pin bed should fit in there all the way. The spring is attached, and now's the point where the participants can test the hand. Closes like this. Now, many times they get it closed and they don't know how to open it. So you want to warn them, don't just pry these things open and trying to like, how does this thing open? Ideally, they've read their instructions and they see that to push on this back, that's how it releases. So again, it closes like this, pushing on that top, and it releases. That spring that we inserted there is what keeps this coming back together, which engages the brass paw with the gear digit and makes the hand work. Again, you can see it's working very crisply, and this hand is functioning well. Sometimes the hand, you can see right here, this is where the plastic was poured to create this gear digit. And it's a very close fit as it goes past the center rigid digit and the outer digit. So every now and then there'll be a little residual of the plastic, and that will cause this to get stuck. So be looking for that if you have a team that for some reason the digit is not bouncing back very properly. Now you can see they don't bounce back consistently, and that's fine, because essentially when it's closed and when I open it, it's going to disengage the brass paw and they're going to flop open, and the longer I hold this open, the more, see, they would eventually go and be consistent with each other. But if I had let this go when one was bouncing, that's why they'll be different. So watch. See how they're different? Because I'm releasing it very quickly. But if I held it open, they should essentially just flop loosely. This is the bulk hand, and it's complete at this point. All right, so if a team comes to you and the hand is, one of the digits is what we'd call sticky finger. It's just sticky. It's not bouncing back very smoothly. Guaranteed what's happened is on that interior, when they were installing that side gear digit over top of the push pin went into that spring. So you have to essentially take off these, pull this whole side off, pull that off, and they'll see that they've damaged that spring, give them a new spring, and they have to start over on that one side. And they can do that essentially in this exact position. They don't have to take out this whole base. Okay, so imagine that this side is not working properly and we've determined we have to pull that off. Maybe you're gonna assist the team. Maybe you just say, go take that apart and come back to me. Here's your new spring, because that's what you're assuming needs to be done. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just do it real fast. This is where it gets tricky. Hold your thumb in here to hold the center digit, and I'm gonna pull the side digit off. Now you can see that mechanism I was talking about earlier. That's how the gear works, right? I'm gonna hold this down with my thumb. I'm going to pull this off, and I could see that this compression pin was hitting the spring and it damaged it. So you need to pull it out. You can use the hooking tool to do that. It works really well. Hook the end of that spring and pull it out. Basically, this groove here is a little wider at one end, and that's the end you can pull it out of. Okay, so I pull it out. If that spring were damaged, it'd be pretty obvious. Even if it's just slightly damaged, we want to substitute that spring. So I'm going to go ahead and insert the new spring. Again, I'm pushing it away. This is the important point where that pin right there is going to go down into. Now we're assembling the hand in a slightly different fashion. So you have to make sure that you're pushing this brass paw down low, and we've got our space there, and we're inserting this with the digit in the open position, like the finger is open. Imagine like you're opening your hand. See how it's open there? It's very important. If you put it on in the closed position, then you're going to hit that spring again. You can see how that's lining up with that pin. So it's very important to be in the open position. Again, you can see now here, the brass paw is engaging into the gear properly. Put your thumb into sort of the mouth or the opening part of the hand so I can slip this on there. And now it's really important that you not test the digit until you have those pins in there. Because remember, these pins or these bolts here, or screws, are what keep that brass paw oriented properly with the gear digit. Again, I'm just gonna tighten this down. Now it's working properly. Now I didn't tighten those quite far enough, but I wanted to test it first. Sub-flush, sub-flush, sub-flush. I can't feel any of those points. Everything is very smooth. And the hand's working perfectly. If this were a damaged spring, we'd throw that away. I think we've covered pretty much everything with the bulk hand itself and how it works and how to assemble it. I want to show you a couple of things that participants will do just because they're going fast, they're not looking at the directions. Sometimes teams, and I'm just going to get some of my supplies from my help desk, sometimes a team will grab the center rigid digit here, and the pin that's supposed to go in there is the pin that looks like this, right? It has threads on one end, has this pin, and it goes down through this hole. And that's what's going to catch the spring that has the hole in the end. Well, they grab this here and they think, oh, this looks like a bolt. There's a hole and it will actually start fitting in there. They grab this and there's no reason why they would do this other than they're just looking for bolts that fit in holes and they screw them in. If they screw that in there, they can damage the threads and potentially shear this bolt off in the hole. They may discover that near the end of the hand is complete. If they've done that, then they're going to have to take the hand entirely apart and you have to give them a brand new center rigid digit. And take the one that actually has this jammed into it and just send it back to us in that condition so we can see what's happened. Okay, something else to be aware of in this early step when you're working with the center rigid digit. The spring, notice the orientation of these eyes. Notice if they're the same. It looks like they're at a 90 to each other. So when I'm inserting this, if I know that this eye oriented like that, then I can slip it through there. And I should be able to tell the orientation of that eye based on the orientation of the outer eye. Now when you take this and you go to insert it here, sometimes when they're molding the plastic and they've CNC'd this hole, there's some leftover plastic down in that hole and you won't be able to get this to go through there. The options are clear that out, try to puncture it with this Allen key. You can just try to puncture the bottom of that hole. Forget about this spring for a minute and just try to get this to screw through by putting some pressure on it so that the threads engage, and then do a test time, screw it all the way in, then back it out and then try to get that through. And in a few cases when you cannot clear that hole, they'll have to ask for a replacement, in which case you have 2 of these out of your 10, so 20% you should be covered. Okay, that happens every now and then, but it does happen. As your teams are assembling the hand, the bulk hand is the most critical part, that it be working perfectly. If you're running short on time, instruct your teams not even to attempt the armband mechanism. Okay, this is the cuff pad that's going to be the very last thing that they insert. So let's just put that over there. I won't need any of my tools for this last step. So here we go. Let's dive into how this cuff assembly works. You're going to put the grommet on there and screw on the bulk hand. This is also helpful to do this when you're just testing your hand, because it gives you some leverage and you can go ahead and test it a few more times, and it's easier when I'm holding this, and teams might want to do that. Okay? Now when I'm tightening this down, the idea with the grommet here is that I can crank it tight, and then if I was using this as a hand and I were putting something in, like a pin, I decided I wanted to be able to back this off slightly so I could use it. Actually, let me use the proper gearing here. This is how they would use this pin. So hold that Sharpie nice and tight. And I can't write like that, so the idea is that they could back it like this and they would be able to write, right? Like this. Okay, and then they can release it. All right, now, once I get this oriented, what I want is to have this wider piece, as you see they're slightly narrow, to be up the back, and if I back this off a half a turn, it doesn't start freewheeling. I still have some tension there. And by freewheeling, this is what I mean. If I turn it one more, you can see it gets to a point where it's loose. So I want to tighten that on, a pretty good crank, so that this wider strap goes up the back of the hand here. And then I'm ready now to attempt the strapping. So I'm going to go ahead and just set the hand here, and I'm going to lay out the strap. The Velcro straps, I'll put those on last. Open up the strap. I'm going to line this up. I have to lay this down. Imagine that the arm is going to be in here. So you want the smooth side to be where the arm would lay for the residual limb, so that this is eventually fitted on the person. All right, we're in the home stretch. The participants have laced this, the strapping mechanism that holds it onto the residual limb. I want to just reiterate that this is not as critical as the bulk hand working perfectly. If your teams have time, absolutely we want them to get these right. But if they don't, it's fine to return it, because the eventual assembly teams or the fitting teams that are traveling internationally, they have to adjust these straps slightly for the recipient. Now, something to add is we will include these, and this is designed for your participants to simulate their own disability so that they can get a sense of what it's like to have to work with one hand and using this as their residual limb. You can have them put it on their right hand if they're right-handed, or left hand, or do it however you want as far as degree of difficulty. They come in 2 sizes. So let's say I would feel comfortable in the larger size. One of the cool things with this is they will naturally go, hey, I want to test this out. I want to see how this works. And I think I'm going to be able to fit my hand a little easier with the smaller one. And it can simulate what the recipient is going to go through in trying to attach and wear the prosthetic hand. Now they're in teams of 3. I'm doing this by myself here, so it's a little more difficult. But this is how the eventual recipient will wear it. It goes above the elbow. And I'm just going to crank this down on me here. And you can see that's how they would wear the hand. This would probably be a little tighter to keep it onto the residual limb, but this is how the hand works. Now you can see here that the hand doesn't have any batteries or any sort of power to it. It's all operated by using either objects or their other hand to manipulate it. I want to show you really quickly like how the hand works. There are a bunch of different grippings, and there's some photos of different gripping techniques in the instruction manual, but that's the basic pen placement right here, okay? And again, this is where the grommet comes in, so I can adjust how I hold it, and you can see that I could write my name. And this is an amazing gift, especially for people who are double amputees. And they use their other hand to release it. So believe it or not, they would be very comfortable to say, oh, I want to hold this. They would ratchet it in there using the other hand. They could then hold it, and they could release that by manipulating it in this sort of way. Okay? Now let's get into the home stretch and how we want their teams to basically clean up and put things away so that you're ready to send the items back to Odyssey. All right, you may have done your assembly in teams of 2 or 3. They've had a chance to finish it. They've decorated their bag, and now it's time to clean up. So we need to put the hand, if they've attached the assembly or the arm mechanism, just roll that up, put that right into the cuff, and now the hand itself, only the hand, goes into the decorated bag. So I'm going to put that in there. Now at this point, somewhere along the line here, once your teams have the decorated bag, you decide whether you're going to be inserting photographs of the assembly team. So in the teams of 2 or 3, you've gone around and you take a photo. You can see this is a developed photo of this bag, and you need to then develop these photos and insert them after the program is over. So at this point, you take the photograph and obviously develop that after. So you want your teams to put only the hand itself into the bag, take your photograph, and then now you're going to dual purpose use this large Ziploc bag that you've received it to insert the final hand into. Okay? What this does is it protects the artwork from the other bags. So if you've built all 10, and you put them back together, they'll smudge on each other, so we want to protect the artwork. So that's ready. Take your instruction manual, put those like items together somewhere. Now I've got the zipper bag. Probably a couple of them took their zipper pulls. Put your Sharpies. You've got some extra Ziploc bags. This is what all the hand parts came in. Basically, this is going to be our recycling bag. Here are your tools. You got the 2 Allen keys and the hooking tool, and you had your screwdriver, as well as the please open when advised, and you can slip that in there. You can see now we've got that. Those are the 3 items. Return those to the separate tables or leave them on your work table or whatever you've done. I hope by this point, after watching this video, you feel prepared to support your program. I encourage you to build the hand completely, take it all the way apart, and of course, integrate it into your program. Remember, your job is to be at the help desk, not to do everything for your participants, but to just be there and guide them through the process. Let them find their way just like you did. Thank you for watching this video and for incorporating the Build a Hand workshop into your workshop. We hope that you have had a great experience with it, and we know certainly that lives are going to be changed because of your efforts and because of your energy. 1.2 million people need these hands around the world. We hope that this is just the beginning.